Film of the moment when the wind stopped. 1. The lonely lighthouse and frozen time. At the edge of the east coast, atop rocky shores, where the sea shattered like foam, stood an old white lighthouse. In the village visible from that lighthouse, at the entrance to the village, a small wooden house with a salt-laden, gray roof served as Kang Taeyong's refuge for the past 30 years. Now 79 years old, he had once been a master documentary photographer who captured the spirit of an era. But now he was merely an old and stubborn man. The interior of the house seemed frozen in time from 30 years ago. The workspace cum darkroom reeked of moisture-laden film, developer chemicals, and mold intermingled in a musty atmosphere. Stacked on the desk were hundreds of rolls of film and faded photographic paper. His only work, Memories of the Sea. Taeyong would wake unfailingly at 5 in the morning and gather his Leica M3 camera. Purchased in the 1970s, this camera was like an extension of himself. Cleaning the lens, loading the film, checking the exposure meter. This series of processes was a ritual he had maintained for 50 years. He would head to the lighthouse. Every day at the same time, in the same place, he photographed the sea. The height of the waves, the angle of the light, the shape of the clouds, all different, yet what he sought was only one thing. The sea from that day. August 17, 1995, the appearance of the sea that had swallowed his wife Minseon. For 30 years, Taeyong had tried to recreate that moment. But the sea never showed the same face. Perhaps that was what kept Taeyong anchored here. An atonement that could never be completed, a penance that could never end. Grandpa. At 2 in the afternoon, Sol, his granddaughter from Seoul, opened the front door. 26-year-old Sol was a promising UI/UX designer at a startup. In her hands were a state-of-the-art laptop and high-performance scanner. She had reluctantly come here at her mother Unju's earnest request to organize and digitize her grandfather's photographs. What are you doing in this dusty place? Far from being archived. The film is going to rot and decay. Sol pulled down her mask and looked around the darkroom. To her eyes, her grandfather's workspace was a collection of inefficiency and attachment. In the digital age, insisting on analog was anachronistic. Oh, Sol's here. I said there was no need to send you. Your mother, really. Taeyong didn't welcome Kang Sol's visit as he fiddled with his old camera. His fingertips were accustomed to tracing the subtle texture of film, completely unlike Sol's finger movements tapping on a smartphone screen. Film doesn't rot. Time just stops there. Grandpa, how does that make sense? Film is a chemical substance. It's weak against moisture, weak against light, and decomposes over time. If we don't digitize it right now, we might lose it forever. Taeyong shook his head. You don't understand. Photography isn't about efficiency. That moment emerging in the developer, the sensation of lifting it, with tweezers that can never be replaced by data created by machines. You live in a digital world, so you don't know the weight of time. Sol sighed. Conversations with her grandfather were always parallel lines. But she couldn't ignore her mother's request. Well, anyway, I came to help with your archiving, so let me try. Taeyong muttered, half listening to Kang Sol's words. Don't mess up the things in the darkroom. They may look scattered, but they're all in my head. Then he picked up his camera and went outside. 2. The master who recorded time. Kang Taeyong had been a known figure in the photography world since the mid-1970s. A graduate of Seoul National University's College of Fine Arts, he went directly to Germany after graduation to study photographic art. When he returned from Germany, what he held in his hands was the Leica M3 camera. In the 1970s, Taeyong captured the rapid changes in Korean society through his lens. Scenes of Seoul's shanty towns being demolished. The sweating faces of farmers mobilized for the New Village movement. Young people on Myeongdong streets, protest sites at Gwanghwamun intersection. His photographs were records bearing witness to an era. In the 1980s, he gained international acclaim. He held a solo exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art MoMA in New York and won the grand prize at the World Press Photo Contest. His photo book, Faces of Time, was translated into 20 languages worldwide. Photography critics called him an artist who captures the soul of an era through his lens. But behind the fame was sacrifice. Taeyong spent half the year overseas. His wife Mincian raised their daughter Anju alone in a small Seoul apartment. When Anju had her elementary school entrance ceremony, her middle school graduation, when she went on her high school field trip, Taeyong was never there. He was always somewhere pressing the shutter. Mincian didn't complain, or rather, she couldn't complain. Her husband's artistic activities fed the family, and that fame gave her a sense of pride as well. But late at night, after putting her daughter to bed, alone, Mincian would think, who am I? Am I Kang Taeyong's wife, or am I Kang Anju's mother? In the early 1990s, Taeyong decided he would no longer go on overseas shoots. He was approaching 50, and his daughter was grown, about to become a college student. He left Seoul and moved to a small fishing village on the east coast. To photograph the sea, was his reason. Mincian followed her husband and left Seoul. She had no choice. Life in the fishing village was different from Seoul. Mincian tended a small garden and mingled with the villagers. For the first time, she could live as Mincian, not as Kang Taeyong's wife. But Taeyong still lived inside his camera. Every dawn he went out to the sea, and late into the night, he shut himself in the darkroom. Their daughter Anju didn't want to leave Seoul. She wanted to attend university in Seoul and study art. But Taeyong was stubborn, and he adamantly opposed art studies. Art is the perfect path to starve to death. You need to have a stable job. It was ironic. Someone who had lived off art his entire life told his daughter she shouldn't pursue art. Mincian suffered between her husband and daughter. She wanted to support her daughter's dreams, but lacked the courage to stand up to her husband's authority. She had lived her entire life under Kang Taeyong's enormous shadow, and now she had no strength left to escape that shadow. 3. The sealed box and the day of tragedy. The next morning, Seol woke early and began organizing the darkroom. Her grandfather had left for the lighthouse at dawn, and she was alone in the house. Seol approached the work systematically. First, she classified the film by year and theme, assessed the degree of damage, and set priorities. On shelves, under the desk, inside drawers, Seol searched every corner. Most were seascapes, photographs of the same lighthouse, taken thousands of times, the same rocky shore taken hundreds of times. Seol couldn't understand. Why did he take so many pictures of the same thing? It was then that she discovered a wooden box, wrapped tightly in black cloth behind an old bookshelf in the corner of the darkroom. Unlike other items, the box was spotlessly clean without a speck of dust. It was a trace of someone having regularly maintained it. Seol pulled out the box. It was heavy. When she unwrapped the cloth, an old wooden box appeared. On the lid of the box was an X mark sewn in red cloth. It was like a warning saying, "Do not open." What is this? Seol hesitated for a moment. Her grandfather had definitely told her not to touch things in the darkroom carelessly, but curiosity got the better of her. She opened the box. Inside were dozens of rolls of film stained with moisture, and on top of the film lay several old photographic prints. Seol picked up one of the photographs. In the photograph was a young woman. Looking to be in her early 20s, she stood with her back to the sea. Her face was covered in tears, and she held her face in both hands. The sky in the background was covered with black clouds. Is this person Mom? Seol was shocked. The woman in the photograph was her mother Anju in her youth. Completely different from the calm and realistic mother of today. The Anju in the photograph was expressing despair with her entire body. The other photographs were the same. Anju crying, Anju with her head down, the back of Anju walking away through the village. All the photographs seemed to have been taken on the same day. And dates were written on the film canisters. August 17, 1995. Seol knew that date. It was the day her grandmother had passed away. Her mother had said almost nothing about that day. She had only heard that Grandma had an accident at sea. Why are there so many photos of Mom from the day Grandma died? And why did he preserve these photos like sacred relics? Seol pulled out more film. Each roll had a date written on it. August 17, 1995. August 17, 1995. August 17, 1995. All the same day. At least 20 rolls of film had been shot in that single day. Just then, she heard the sound of the front door opening. Grandfather was back. Seol hurriedly tried to put the box back in its place, but it was too late. Taeyong opened the darkroom door and entered. Sol, what are you doing? Taeyong's gaze stopped at the photograph in Sol's hand. His face turned pale. I told you not to touch that. Taeyong's voice trembled. It was the first time Sol had heard her grandfather's voice like that. Not anger, not disappointment, pure fear. Grandpa, what is this? Why are there so many photos of Mom? And why did you only photograph the day Grandma died? Taeyong didn't answer. He staggered and snatched at the photograph. His hand trembled. The photograph fell to the floor. Grandpa, please answer me. What happened that day? Don't say it. I can't say. Taeyong tried to pick up the photograph and collapsed right there. He clutched his chest. His breathing became labored. Grandpa. Sol rushed to support her grandfather in alarm. Taeyong's face was pale, and cold sweat poured down. His blood pressure seemed to have spiked suddenly. Grandpa, calm down. I'll call 119. Sol hurriedly made the call. Until the ambulance arrived, she laid her grandfather on the floor and checked his breathing. Taeyong gasped and muttered, I'm sorry, Unju, I'm sorry. Sol realized at that moment. The reason her grandfather had been holed up here for 30 years wasn't simple artistic obsession. Something terrible had happened that day. August 17, 1995, and her grandfather had been carrying it for his entire life. 4. Choice in the storm. Hospital emergency room. Taeyong had stabilized but was still lying in bed. Sol sat in a chair beside the bed watching over her grandfather. She called her mother Unju, but Unju said, if Grandpa is okay. There's no need to come, and didn't come. Sol found her mother's reaction strange. Night deepened. Taeyong woke from sleep. Under the dim hospital room lighting, he saw Sol. Sol, are you still here? Yes, Grandpa. How are you feeling? I'm fine. When you get old, your body doesn't listen. Silence flowed. Sol carefully asked, Grandpa, that day, what happened? Taeyong stared at the ceiling. After a long silence, he opened his mouth. August 17, 1995. That day was the most shameful day of my life. Taeyong's voice trembled, but this time he didn't run away. The memories he had sealed away for 30 years finally came out of his mouth. That morning, your grandmother and I had a huge fight. Your mother Unju wanted to go to art school, and I opposed it. I knew all too well how hard an artist's life is. I wanted Unju to become a civil servant. I hoped she would live a stable life. Taeyong paused for a moment. He steadied his breathing and continued. Your grandmother yelled at me. You've been away from home all your life saying it was for art. Now you're telling your daughter not to do art? How does that make sense? I said the most cruel thing at that moment. What did you say? What do you know about art? You've been nothing but my shadow all your life. That's what I said. I can still never forget Minseon's face. At that moment, all the light disappeared from her face. Tears welled in Taeyong's eyes. Minseon got in the car and left. She said she'd cool her head and come back. I was angry too, so I took my camera and went outside. I sat on the rocks below the lighthouse, glaring at the sea. That's when I saw Unju. Her back as she walked out of the village, crying. Sol listened, holding her breath. At that moment, something inside me activated. A photographer's instinct, you could call it. Unju's appearance. It was a perfect composition. Despair, sadness, loneliness. Everything was captured in that receding figure. I pressed the shutter. Grandpa, not just once. I kept shooting. Unju going down the hill, walking with her head down. Leaving the village entrance. I should have chased after my daughter to comfort her. Or at least I should have put down the camera. But I chose to record. Taeyong's voice grew smaller and smaller. Not long after, the sky suddenly darkened. Black clouds rolled in, and the wind grew fierce. Only then did I come to my senses and return home. I thought Minseon would have returned. But the house was empty. I went back out to the sea. A storm was raging. Waves crashed over the seawall. I photographed the sea. What? I was crazy. Even in that moment, I was holding my camera. I thought, this is the sea I've been looking for. The perfect storm, the perfect composition. I pressed the shutter. Again and again. Taeyong covered his face with both hands. That night, Minseon didn't come back. Not the next morning, not the day after. 3 days later, the Coast Guard found Minseon's car near the seawall. The car had been swept by waves and crashed into rocks, and Mincian was found inside. Sol held her grandfather's hand. Taeyong continued speaking. The police said it was an accident. That the seawall was suddenly flooded by the storm and Mincian couldn't get out. But I know. I killed Mincian. My words, my indifference, my obsession with art drove her to the sea. Grandpa, that's not. And I was taking pictures even in that moment. Even as my wife was being swallowed by the sea. I was obsessed with recording the perfect storm. I'm a monster, Sol. Taeyong sobbed. The guilt he had suppressed for 20 years burst out all at once. That's why I couldn't leave here. Every day I went out to the sea looking for the sea from that day. I wanted to photograph that storm once more, properly record it this time, and dedicate it to Mincian. I thought that was the only atonement I could make. Sol couldn't say anything. Her grandfather's stubbornness wasn't artistic passion, but lifelong guilt. And the photograph of Unju in the sealed film was evidence of that terrible moment when her grandfather chose art over family. 5. Mother's wound. The next day, Sol called Sol. She needed to talk properly with her mother Unju. Mom, I heard from Grandpa. About that day. A long silence flowed from the other end of the phone. Unju's voice was heard. I see. Now you know. Mom, why didn't you tell me? I only knew that Grandma died in an accident. I couldn't say it, Sol. That day. It hurt too much. Dad had his camera even on the day Mom died. Even when I was crying, even when we found Mom's body. Even on the day of the funeral. For Dad, the camera was everything. Unju's voice trembled. I couldn't forgive Dad. So I came up to Seoul, took the civil service exam, got married, and had you. I lived the stable life Dad wanted. But the strange thing was, even while living that way, I sometimes regretted not going to art school. Mom, Dad forbade me from doing art. But he himself lived his entire life staking everything on art. That was so ironic, and I was so angry. But at the same time, I had to acknowledge that I resembled Dad. Even while raising you, I sometimes drew. Secretly, without anyone knowing. It was the first time Sol was hearing this. You draw, Mom? Yes. As a hobby. I didn't learn it from Dad, but I guess blood can't be hidden. Sol, seeing that you also became a designer. Maybe it's our family's fate that we can't escape art. Unju sighed. Thank you for taking care of Dad. I'm not ready to forgive Dad yet. Maybe someday I can, but not now. Okay, Mom. Take your time. Sol, organize Dad's photos properly. They're works he spent his entire life creating. Even though our family fell apart because of them. Still, that was Dad's life. After hanging up, Sol thought. Grandfather had lived his life. Atoning, and her mother had lived her life carrying wounds. And the gap between them hadn't narrowed even after 30 years. What can I do? 6. Restoring time digitally. Sol began working in earnest while waiting for her grandfather's discharge. First, she organized the general film. The sea photographs Taeyong had taken over 30 years. Numbered in the thousands. The same lighthouse, the same rocky shore, the same horizon. But looking closely, they were all different. The height of the waves, the angle of light, the color of the sky. Her grandfather had spent 30 years trying to complete a single photograph. Sol digitized the film with a high-performance scanner. She removed dust, corrected colors, and increased resolution. The photographs spread across the computer screen were astonishing. Her grandfather's technique was still alive. Composition, exposure, timing. Everything was perfect. But the sealed film was different. Sol agonized for days. Should she scan that film? Her grandfather had sealed it for 30 years. Perhaps it should be sealed forever. But Sol made up her mind. Perhaps inside that film lay the key to reconciling her grandfather and mother. The work was tricky. The film was damaged by moisture, and mold spores covered the surface. Sol carefully cleaned the film and placed it on the scanner. Blue light penetrated the film. An image emerged on the screen. Young Unju's face. A face covered in tears. Eyes filled with despair. Sol held her breath. She had never seen her mother like that. Her mother who was always calm, rational, and strong. But the Unju in the photograph was completely broken. Sol continued scanning. Unju going down the hill. Her head down, leaving the village entrance. And the sea in the storm. Giant waves. Black sky. Lightning. Grandpa lived for 30 years looking at this. Saul understood why her grandfather went out to the sea every day. Why he took the same scene thousands of times. He was trying to find the sea from that day again. To reproduce it perfectly, to record the violence and beauty contained within. And his own guilt. Saul began digital restoration work. First, she removed the dust of time. Using AI algorithms, she restored discolored parts to their original colors. She erased mold stains. She restored scratched parts. The traces of 30 years disappeared one by one. But she didn't touch the emotions. Anju's tears, despair, sadness, she left them as they were. Because that was the truth. Next, she attempted to rearrange the light. She added warm tones to photographs that had been dark and despairing. Then something amazing happened. What had shown only despair in Anju's face now also began to show the love contained within the sadness. The sadness of a daughter who lost her mother. The sadness of a daughter disappointed in her father. But beyond all that, the love for family that still remained. Saul realized, the photographs her grandfather had taken that day weren't simply a record of despair. They were also a record of love. Her grandfather, looking at his daughter through the camera, must have felt both remorse and love simultaneously. He just didn't know how to express that love. Saul worked through several nights. She restored dozens of photographs one by one. And she wove them into a single sequence. Beginning with Anju's receding figure, continuing to the sea in the storm. And ending with the sea that had become calm again. It was a family tragedy and simultaneously a journey toward healing. 7. The moment the wind stopped. A week later, Taeyong was discharged. Returning home, he was still frail, but his eyes were different from before. The eyes of someone who had let something go. Saul guided her grandfather to the darkroom. On the desk lay a new laptop. And beside it was a carefully bound photo book. "Grandpa, please look at this." Taeyong picked up the photo book. On the cover was a title, "Film of the Moment When the Wind Stopped." He slowly turned the pages. The first page was Anju's receding figure. The Anju in the restored photograph was still sad. But now that sadness felt beautiful. The next page showed her going down the hill. The next was the village entrance. And then the storm. But Saul didn't stop there. After the storm came the sea photographs her grandfather had taken over 30 years. The sea a little different each day. The sea on sunny days, the sea on cloudy days. The sea at sunset, the sea at sunrise. And on the last page was a calm sea. A mirror-like sea without a single wave. Tears flowed from Taeyong's eyes. "Saul, this is Grandpa's 30 years. 30 years of atonement, but also 30 years of love. Grandpa didn't not love Mom. He just didn't know how to express it. And these photographs are the proof." Taeyong hugged the photo book to his chest. The pain he had sealed away for 30 years was now transforming into healing. "Grandpa, there's one more thing." Saul opened the laptop. On the screen, a video file was ready. When she pressed the play button, music began to flow. And on the screen, her grandfather's photographs began to transition slowly. Anju's receding figure, the storm, the sea, the lighthouse. Thousands of photographs woven into one flow. It was like a documentary. No, it was a person's life itself. When the video ended, text appeared on the screen. Dedicated to Kim Min-seon, and an apology to Kang Anju. Kang Taeyong. Taeyong silently stared at the screen. After a long silence, he spoke. "Saul, thank you. You've done what I couldn't do." "No, Grandpa. This was originally your work. I just dusted off the time." Taeyong shook his head. "No, you found what I couldn't find in 30 years. That's forgiveness. I wanted to be forgiven by Min-seon, wanted to be forgiven by Anju. But the truth was I couldn't forgive myself. You showed me how to forgive myself." Saul held her grandfather's hand. That hand was still rough, but now it was warm. "Grandpa, can I show this to Mom?" Taeyong hesitated for a moment. Then he nodded. "Yes, now seems to be the time to show her." 8. The Sea of Reconciliation. A month later, Anju visited the village on the east coast. It was her first visit in 10 years. Getting out of the car, Anju gazed at the distant lighthouse. That lighthouse still stood in its place. When she opened the house door, Taeyong stood at the entrance. Father and daughter stood in silence for a while, looking at each other. "Come in." "Yes, Father." In the awkward atmosphere, Saul brought out tea. The three sat in the living room. Anju, could you look at this? Taeyong handed the photo book to Anju. Anju saw the cover and her hand trembled. Film of the moment when the wind stopped. She knew. The memories of that day were contained within. She slowly turned the pages. Her own receding figure appeared. Herself on that day 30 years ago, leaving the village in despair. Tears welled in Anju's eyes. Father, why this? I'm sorry, Anju. I should have comforted you that day. I should have stopped your mother. But I was holding my camera. I was a terrible father. Anju shook her head. Tears streamed down her cheeks. No, father. I couldn't understand you either. How important photography was to you, how much art meant. I just ran away because I hated you. It wasn't your fault. It wasn't your fault either, father. Father and daughter looked at each other. The misunderstandings and wounds accumulated over 30 years slowly melted away. Saul quietly said, Grandpa, Mom, may I say something too? Both nodded. While restoring Grandpa's photographs, I realized something. Art is inefficient and sometimes cruel. But within it is truth. Grandpa loved Grandma and loved Mom. He just could only express that love through the camera. Saul opened the laptop. And Mom, you're like Grandpa too. You became a civil servant. But you still draw sometimes, right? Blood can't be hidden. Taeyong looked at Saul with a surprised face. How did you? Mom told me on the phone. So I thought, maybe it's our family's fate that we can't escape art. Grandpa has photography, Mom has painting, I have design. The forms are different, but in the end we're all pursuing beauty. Taeyong laughed. It was a genuine smile for the first time in a long while. That's true. Our family is really special. Anju smiled too, and she held her father's hand. Father, now, you can stop photographing the sea. You've done enough. Taeyong shook his head. No, this is the beginning. From now on, I'll shoot not out of atonement, but out of love. To remember your mother, and to record you and Saul. Anju wiped her tears and asked, then can I come sometimes and shoot together? Of course. You wanted to go to art school, right? It's not too late even now. Father, I mean it. I opposed you doing art because I was scared. I was afraid you'd neglect your family like I did. But now I know. Art and family can coexist. Saul opened the last page of the photo book. There was blank space left for the three of them to be photographed together. Now, let's all three take a photo together. To record a new beginning. Taeyong took out the Leica camera. The camera he had been with for 50 years. But this time, he set the timer, and all three entered the frame together. 1, 2, 3. The shutter clicked. Click. At that moment, the wind stopped. The sea became calm. The sky cleared. The storm that had raged for 30 years had finally ended. Epilogue. 3 months later, a retrospective exhibition of Kang Taeyong's work was held at a gallery in Seoul. The title was Film of the Moment When the Wind Stopped. In the exhibition hall hung photographs Taeyong had taken throughout his life. Scenes of 1970s Seoul, 1980s democratization protests, 1990s fishing villages, and 30 years of the sea. But the place where the most people gathered was the last room. There displayed were the sealed films. Anju's receding figure, the sea in the storm, and the sea that had become calm. The photographs digitally restored by Saul moved the hearts of visitors. One critic wrote, Kang Taeyong's photographs are records of an era. And one individual's confession. He saw the world through the lens, but ultimately discovered the human beyond the lens. His final work, Film of the Moment When the Wind Stopped, shows how art and life, passion and love, guilt and forgiveness can coexist. On the opening day of the exhibition, Taeyong, Anju, and Saul stood together. Anju had recently enrolled in an art academy. It was a late start at age 50, but she looked happy. Saul had perfectly digitally archived her grandfather's photographs. She preserved them permanently on cloud servers, so anyone in the world could view them. But she also carefully kept the original films, because she now knew that both digital and analog were important. After the exhibition ended, the three returned to the village on the east coast. Taeyong sat on the rocks in front of the lighthouse and raised his camera. But this time he wasn't alone. Anju opened her sketchbook, and Saul did digital drawing on her tablet. Grandfather photographed the sea, mother drew the sea, and granddaughter designed the sea. 3 generations pursued the same beauty in their own ways. The sun set, and the sky turned red. Taeyong lowered his camera and said, "Now I finally understand what I've been searching for all my life." "What is it, Grandpa?" "Not a perfect photograph, but someone to take photographs with. Art isn't something you do alone, it's something you share with the people you love." Saul said with a laugh, "Grandpa, that's a famous quote material. Can I post it on Instagram?" "What's Instagram?" "Oh, Grandpa." The laughter of 3 people spread over the sea. The lighthouse's light came on, and night arrived. But in their hearts, a warm light was lit. The moment the wind stopped, a true photograph was completed. It was a photograph taken not with a camera, but with love directed at each other. The end.